In the early 1930s, Britain's fighter aviation found itself in a unique position. Every aircraft in service was still a biplane, the twin-wing design that had dominated the skies since the First World War. The best of them was considered to be the Hawker Fury, developed by the Hawker design team under the leadership of Sidney Cam. This compact biplane, powered by a V-type Kestrel engine, was renowned for its rapid climb rate and excellent maneuverability, making it a favorite among Royal Air Force pilots. The Fury was so fast that it could outrun the latest light bomber, the Hawker Hart, also designed by Cam. For its time, this was a breakthrough achievement. Speed and agility were seen as the essential qualities of a fighter. But aviation technology was advancing rapidly. By the mid-1930s, the pace of innovation had accelerated, and biplanes, despite their strengths, were beginning to show their age. Sidney Cam, an experienced designer and member of Hawker's board of directors, knew that even with constant refinements, the Fury would not be able to meet future challenges for long. He had been polishing its aerodynamics, upgrading its engine, and improving its systems. But these were only stopgap measures. They brought small performance gains, yet fell short of delivering the leap forward needed to compete with the next generation of fighters. The age of fast monoplanes was dawning, and Cam sensed that the time had come to design a completely new aircraft that could replace the Fury. At the same time, Britain's Air Ministry was wrestling with its own strategic uncertainties. Fighter policy was being shaped by Specification F-730, which reflected a muddled vision of the future of air combat. Drafted in the spirit of post-First World War cost-cutting, the specification called for a general-purpose fighter, one that could intercept enemy aircraft, dogfight with hostile fighters, escort bombers, and even carry out ground attack missions. The maximum speed requirement was set at just 250 mph for 403 km/h, modest for the mid-1930s. Armament remained light, only 4 303 caliber 7.7 mm machine guns. The concept was rooted in the idea of close-range dogfights, still considered standard at the time. Yet these ideas were already becoming outdated. Around the world, trends pointed toward higher speeds, greater operational altitudes, and heavier firepower. The Air Ministry was not blind to these changes. Although Europe was still relatively calm and Hitler had not yet consolidated his power, it was clear that potential adversaries were modernizing their air forces. In 1934, the F-730 requirement was revised, increasing the speed goal to 275 mph, 443 km/h. But even this fell short of matching the performance of new designs emerging abroad. In Germany, the United States, and the Soviet Union, high-speed monoplanes, soon dubbed the New Wave, were already taking shape, promising to redefine the rules of aerial combat. Sidney Cam, with his long experience, recognized the shift. As far back as 1925, he had designed a monoplane fighter, but the project never went into production. Now, however, the moment for monoplanes had truly arrived. He understood that biplanes, for all their agility, could not compete with the speed and power of the new machines. The Fury was the pinnacle of biplane design, but the future demanded a fighter of a fundamentally different kind. Cam began to consider an ambitious idea, a deep redesign of the Fury into a monoplane. It was a risky move. The Air Ministry still favored the tried-and-true biplane formula, and funding for new projects was limited. But Hawker had a strong industrial and financial foundation to support such ambitions. The Hart bomber, another of Cam's designs, had spawned an entire family of aircraft: light bombers, reconnaissance planes, and heavy fighters, which formed a major part of the RAF's inventory during the interwar years and brought the company steady revenue. This gave Cam the freedom to experiment, even without immediate official backing. In parallel with the monoplane concept, Cam also worked on the PV-3, an upgraded biplane version of the Fury with stronger armament and the same Rolls-Royce Goshawk engine. It was his plan B in case the monoplane failed to deliver. The need for a new fighter was undeniable. British aviation stood at the threshold of change, and Sidney Cam saw an opportunity to build an aircraft that would not only replace the Fury, but set a new standard for the Royal Air Force. His decision to pursue a monoplane marked the first step toward the creation of the Hawker Hurricane, a fighter that would go on to become a legend. Recognizing the urgent need for a new fighter, Sidney Cam embarked on an ambitious project initially known as the Fury monoplane. His idea was to take one of the experimental versions of the Fury biplane, the high-speed Fury, and transform it into a monoplane. It was a logical starting point. The Fury's structure had already proven its reliability. The fuselage of the high-speed Fury was carried over almost unchanged, with only a slight enlargement of the midsection frames to accommodate a fully enclosed cockpit. This cockpit promised better aerodynamics and improved pilot protection. The fuselage retained Hawker's traditional construction, a load-bearing frame made of metal tubes, patented by Thomas Sopwith back in 1926, reinforced with diagonal bracing, with formers and stringers supporting a fabric covering. The tail unit and undercarriage were also taken directly from the Fury. The landing gear consisted of fixed cantilever legs with teardrop-shaped spats over the wheels. Simple and robust, but no longer suited to the new speed standards. The only entirely new element was the wing. It had a thick aerofoil section, allowing space for both armament and fuel tanks, but also presenting aerodynamic challenges. For the new aircraft, CAM initially planned to use the Rolls-Royce Goshawk engine with evaporative cooling, then considered promising for its efficiency. In June 1933, Hawker built a 1/10 scale model and tested it in a wind tunnel. By August, the results were compiled, and the preliminary design, along with the data, was submitted to the Air Ministry. Officials, however, responded coolly, still favoring the familiar biplanes. CAM was undeterred. Relying on Hawker's strong finances, he decided to continue development at the company's own expense. The firm had the means, as its Hart-derived aircraft formed a large part of the RAF's inventory, providing a steady income. At the same time, CAM worked on the PV-3 biplane as insurance in case the monoplane project failed. A turning point came in January 1934 when Rolls-Royce unveiled its new PV-12 engine, soon to be known as the Merlin. This power plant was a genuine breakthrough, delivering 40 to 60% more power at various altitudes compared to the Fury's Kestrel engine. The Hawker design team eagerly seized the opportunity to move away from the less reliable Goshawk. Fitting the PV-12 required major redesign work. The heavier engine shifted the center of gravity forward, forcing the radiator to be relocated aft, beneath the wing center section. This change eliminated the possibility of retracting it as originally planned. The modifications were so extensive that the aircraft no longer resembled the Fury, prompting a new name, Interceptor Monoplane. The name reflected CAM's vision, a high-speed fighter designed primarily to intercept enemy aircraft. Between February and March 1934, two significant innovations were added. First, the fixed Fury landing gear was replaced with a then-fashionable retractable undercarriage. Moving the radiator aft freed up space in the forward wing center section, where wheel wells and struts could be housed. The gear retracted inward toward the fuselage using a hydraulic mechanism manually powered by the pilot. In the folded position, wheels and struts were enclosed by fairings to improve aerodynamics. Second, the armament layout was revised. Specification F-730 required 4.303 caliber, 7.7 meter machine guns, and initially the tried and tested Vickers MKV was planned. But the RAF considered them outdated. After trials of various weapons, the choice fell on the American Browning, adapted to the British 303 round under license from Colt Automatic Weapon Corporation. CAM's design placed 2 Brownings in the wings and 2 Vickers in the fuselage. Soon afterward, the new specification F-534 appeared, updating F-730 and significantly increasing the required armament to 6 or 8 machine guns. Fearing delays, CAM chose to stick with the original 4-gun configuration for the prototype, but began exploring how additional guns could be fitted. In May 1934, work began on detailed prototype drawings. In June, a reduced-scale model was tested at the Teddington Wind Tunnel. Results indicated the aircraft could reach 348 mph, 560 km/h, far exceeding F-730's requirements. By late August, the Air Ministry issued Specification F-3634, which effectively described the aircraft CAM's team had already designed, a single-seat, high-speed monoplane with a target maximum speed of 310 mph, 515 km/h. On 4 September, Hawker officially received the contract. By autumn 1934, construction of a full-scale mock-up had begun and was completed in December. On 17 November, the prototype shop received its first drawings and production tooling began. On 10 January 1935, a mock-up conference was held at Kingston. Air Ministry and RAF representatives approved the design, though it still mounted only 2 Vickers guns. They were aware that production of the new Brownings in Birmingham had not yet started. On 21 February, Hawker submitted updated performance estimates. A top speed of 329 mph, 530 km at an all-up weight of 4,915 lb, 2,930 about 300 lb, 135 kg heavier than first calculated due to the heavier engine and increased ammunition load. That same day, the Air Ministry ordered a single prototype to be registered as K5083. This stage marked a decisive shift. What began as an upgrade to the Fury had evolved into the design of an entirely new aircraft. The choice of the Merlin engine and the reimagining of the fighter's role as a dedicated interceptor laid the foundation for the future success of the type. Ahead lay the test flights that would prove whether the interceptor monoplane could meet its promise. Following the project's approval and the order for the experimental airframe K5083, Hawker's team began work on the first prototype. Progress was swift. Even before the Air Ministry's official order dated 21 February 1935, the experimental shop had already started assembly. The build took roughly 6 months, and by August 1935, the aircraft was structurally complete. The next 6 weeks were spent covering the fuselage, wings, and tail surfaces with fabric, and carrying out inspections of all systems and components. The prototype was fitted with a Merlin C engine, which had not yet completed the full endurance testing required for certification. But the significance of the new fighter to the Royal Air Force was so great that the decision was made to proceed regardless. On 23 October 1935, the aircraft was moved to Brooklands Airfield. There it was reassembled after transport, weighed, its engine run tested, and handed over to Hawker's chief test pilot Philip Bolton Bullman, a First World War veteran who had been test flying Hawker aircraft since 1925, including advanced designs from the Farnborough Research Center. On 6 November, Bullman took K5083 into the air for the first time, a historic milestone as the maiden flight of a British monoplane fighter that would go on to shape RAF history. Initial flights revealed strong potential, but also areas in need of refinement. Takeoff weight came in at 5,423 kg, 2,460 kg, higher than planned, due to the addition of ballast in place of the yet-to-be-fitted guns and radio set, and the enlargement of fuel tanks. Armament at this stage consisted of only 2 Vickers machine guns, as production of the Browning weapons had not yet begun. The prototype achieved a top speed of 315 mph, 507 km/h, exceeding the 300 mph mark, impressive for a British fighter of the day, though still short of the 329 mph, 530 km/h target. Bullman noted several issues. The cockpit was cramped and forward visibility during taxiing was limited, though he adapted quickly. The Merlin C showed a tendency to overheat, necessitating a larger radiator and redesigned fairing. This altered the aerodynamics, forcing the design team to balance cooling efficiency against speed. The canopy framing vibrated at high speeds and had to be reinforced. The tailplane struts were deemed unnecessary and removed. The center section of the flaps, positioned beneath the radiator, disrupted airflow and was also deleted. Lower sections of the undercarriage fairings, which swung outward during landing, were judged redundant and removed, simplifying the design. With these modifications, takeoff weight increased to 5,683 lb, 2,177, but the performance and handling benefits justified the change. In February 1936, the prototype was sent to the Aeroplane and Armament Experimental Establishment, ANAEE, at Martlesham Heath for further trials. There, test pilot D. Anderson confirmed Hawker's flight test results, praising the aircraft's maneuverability and handling. He noted heavier control forces at high speed, expected for a thick-wing monoplane, but did not consider it a major flaw. Stability remained sound, suggesting strong combat potential. Meanwhile, Hawker was already preparing for production. In March 1936, engineers began drafting manufacturing drawings for large-scale output. This was a critical phase, as the fighter had to meet technical requirements while also being easy and economical to build. At the same time, the RAF was accelerating its modernization program in response to rising tensions in Europe after Hitler's rise to power. New fighters were urgently needed, and the interceptor monoplane was well placed to become a cornerstone of the fleet. The tests also exposed weaknesses. In February 1936, the Merlin C failed due to the engine's developmental immaturity. This was a serious concern, as reliability was critical for a combat aircraft. Other problems surfaced. The hydraulic landing gear system needed refinement, and the fabric-covered fuselage raised questions about durability at high speed. These issues demanded urgent solutions, especially with rivals like Supermarine pushing forward with the Spitfire and the international situation worsening. The prototype trials were a turning point. They proved that CAM's monoplane could decisively outclass the RAF's outdated biplanes, but that it required careful fine-tuning. Successful flights at Brooklands and Martlesham Heath validated the design's direction, while pilot feedback gave Hawker clear guidance for improvements. The fighter, for soon-to-be-named the Hurricane, was on the verge of rewriting the history of British aviation. The successful trials of prototype K5083 paved the way for mass production of the new fighter, now officially named the Hawker Hurricane. On 3 June 1936, the Air Ministry placed an unprecedented peacetime order for 600 aircraft, the largest in RAF history at the time. This decision reflected a growing awareness of the urgent need to modernize Britain's air fleet in the face of mounting tensions in Europe. Production began at Hawker's Kingston factory and was soon supplemented by facilities within the Hawker Siddeley Group. Some aircraft were assembled at the Brooklands plant, where they underwent final adjustments and flight acceptance tests. Each airframe typically completed around a dozen test flights before delivery. The Hurricane's public debut came in July 1936 at the Hendon Air Show. Although the aircraft on display lacked its full armament, it impressed crowds with its speed and sleek monoplane design. By August, the wings were fitted with 8 303-inch, 7.7-meter Browning machine guns in line with updated Air Ministry requirements. This move addressed the growing consensus that the earlier 4-gun standard was inadequate for modern air combat. Ammunition belts were fed from 4 boxes of 338 rounds each, and 2 outer boxes of 324 rounds with a choice of standard, armor-piercing, and incendiary rounds to maximize combat effectiveness. The production Hurricane MKI was powered by the Rolls-Royce Merlin II, more reliable than the Merlin C used in the prototype, producing around 1,065 horsepower. This engine upgrade required changes to the installation. The coolant expansion tank was relocated, the upper engine cowling redesigned, and the carburetor intake enlarged. A new starter system was fitted, and engine controls were improved for easier operation. These modifications delayed the program, and instead of flying in May-June 1937 as planned, the first production aircraft took to the air only in September. On 12 October 1937, test pilot F. Lucas flew the first production machine, followed by the second 6 days later. By late November, 7 had been test flown. Development continued into 1938 with improvements to the propeller. Early Hurricanes used a fixed-pitch, 2-bladed wooden Watts Z38 propeller, but this was replaced by a 3-bladed, 2-position Hamilton metal propeller, which greatly improved climb performance. From January 1939, de Havilland and Rotol constant-speed propellers were introduced, the latter using wooden blades but adding 300 lb, 135 kg in weight compared to the Watts, requiring recalculation of weight distribution. New ejector-type exhaust stacks, designed by Rolls-Royce, added roughly 2 mPh 3 km/h to top speed and became standard. In June 1938, an ANAEE test with these exhausts recorded a maximum speed of 316 mph, 508 km/h. To improve combat survivability, armor protection began to be added in 1939. The first feature, an armored bulkhead ahead of the cockpit, entered production early in the year. In February, an armored windscreen was tested. By April, an armored seatback was added. By September 1939, all new Hurricanes left the factory with full armor protection, a critical improvement as war loomed. Radio equipment was also updated, with the TR Bond and Lash-33 replacing the older TR-9. Trials were conducted with fully automatic de Havilland and Rotol propellers using magnesium alloy blades. Hawker also worked on adapting the Hurricane for operations outside Europe. With interest from Turkey and Iran and the RAF's growing need in Africa and the Middle East, a tropicalized version was developed. In February 1939, the Vaux company was contracted to produce a dust filter for the carburetor. Chief designer S. Vaux proposed a large multi-V filter mounted beneath the aircraft's nose, enclosed in a specially contoured section of cowling. The first flight of the tropical Hurricane took place on 17 May 1939, after which the aircraft was sent for trials in Khartoum, Sudan. Another major step was the introduction of an all-metal wing. Sidney Cam had begun work on this in 1935, intending it for both the Hurricane and other aircraft such as the Henley and Hotspur. A duralumin-skinned metal wing was first tested on a Henley prototype in August 1937 and on a Hurricane in April 1939. Only a few sets were produced by mid-1939, but once production tooling was ready, output ramped up. With the outbreak of war, all new Hurricanes were fitted with the stronger, more combat-resistant metal wings. The first production Hurricanes reached No. 111 Squadron at Northolt, late in 1937. By February 1938, the squadron had 16 aircraft. Transition training was challenging. Pilots accustomed to gauntlet biplanes experienced accidents, particularly on the ground, due to the Hurricane's different handling. Under the leadership of squadron leader J. Gillen, the unit adapted. On 10 February 1938, Gillen made a record-breaking flight from Northolt to Edinburgh and back, achieving an average ground speed of 400 mph, 657 km/h, thanks to strong tailwinds. In 1938, further refinements were made. The tailwheel was locked in a fixed position, a small ventral fin was added to improve spin recovery, and the rudder was lengthened. By mid-year, the Kingston plant had built around 80 Hurricanes, 50 of which had entered frontline service. The aircraft was also showcased abroad. In November 1938, one was displayed at the Paris Air Show, and in July 1939, pilot R. Raynell performed aerobatics at the Brussels exhibition, both appearances boosting the Hurricane's international profile. By the start of the Second World War, Hawker had completed 497 of the 600 aircraft from the original order, and 18 RAF squadrons were fully operational. The Hurricane had become the backbone of Britain's fighter force, ready to face the coming test of war. When the Second World War began on 1 September 1939 with the Wehrmacht's invasion of Poland, the Hawker Hurricane was about to face its first real combat test. 2 days later, Britain and France declared war on Germany, and the RAF's newest fighter prepared for its baptism of fire. 4 Hurricane squadrons, Nosjasher 1, 79, 85, and 87, were sent to France as part of the British Expeditionary Force. The first to arrive on 8 September was No. 1 Squadron, based at Le Havre. The Hurricane was chosen for operations in France for 2 main reasons. First, the more advanced Spitfire was being reserved for the defense of Britain, and second, the Hurricane's rugged landing gear was better suited to the uneven surfaces of forward airfields. The period known as the Phony War, Varshius, from September 1939 to May 1940 saw little direct combat. RAF pilots patrolled the front lines, carried out reconnaissance, and even dropped propaganda leaflets, avoiding large-scale engagements. The Hurricane scored its first kill on 30 October 1939 when pilot officer P. Mould of No. 1 Squadron intercepted 3 Dornier Du 17 bombers over Vassencourt, catching them by surprise before they could return fire. On 2 November, No. 73 Squadron downed another Du 17, and on 23 November, Flying Officer Plinston shot down a Heinkel, He 111 over Saarbrücken. By the end of 1939, RAF fighters had claimed around 20 enemy aircraft. Problems soon emerged, particularly with armament. The Browning machine guns often jammed due to old ammunition that had been in storage for over 30 years. Replacing these rounds solved the issue, and early production Hurricanes were gradually upgraded with new propellers and exhaust stacks. The true trial came in May 1940 when Germany launched its offensive against the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg. The 4 Expeditionary Force squadrons, Nosern 85, 87, 607, and 615, were reinforced by 3 more, Nosern 3, 79, and 504. At the same time, the forward-based Nosern 173 and the newly arrived No. 501 squadrons operated from southeastern French airfields. On 11 May, only an hour after arriving in France, No. 501 Squadron engaged 40 of 111 bombers, shooting down 5 without loss. The next day, combat intensified. The squadron claimed 7, He 101s, 3 Do-17s, 1 Bf-110, and 1 Ju-88, but lost 2 pilots. Hurricanes were tasked with patrolling, intercepting bombers and reconnaissance aircraft, and escorting light bombers such as the Ferry Battle and Bristol Blenheim. The fighting quickly became fierce, with RAF pilots often facing enemy formations of 50 to 60 aircraft. Losses mounted rapidly, the Luftwaffe, having seized air superiority, bombed airfields, destroying many Hurricanes on the ground. Damaged aircraft were often burned or abandoned during retreats. By 17th May, only 3 squadrons remained operational. On 21st May, the remnants of the expeditionary force were ordered to fly back to southern England, from where they covered the evacuation of British forces at Dunkirk. During the Dunkirk operation, home-based squadrons joined the fight alongside Spitfires. Over 9 days of evacuation, some Hurricane pilots flew 5 or 6 sorties a day. On 27th May, Sergeant Butterfield downed 4 enemy aircraft, Geordi-8, a Bf-110, and 2 Bf-109s. The Hurricane was also tested in Norway. In May 1940, a squadron was ferried aboard the carrier HMS Glorious to Bardufoss, tasked with defending the port of Narvik. On 28th May, its pilots shot down a Ju-88 and 2 Dornier Do-26 flying boats. But Norway could not be held. On 7 June, orders were given to destroy the aircraft to prevent capture. Instead, the pilots risked flying them back onto the Glorious without carrier landing gear. Tragically, the ship was sunk by German naval forces, taking nearly all the aircraft and aircrew with her. Only 2 pilots survived, rescued by a merchant ship. In France, the RAF lost 261 Hurricanes, 2/3 of them destroyed or abandoned on the ground. At Dunkirk, 219 fighters of all types were lost, and in Norway, an entire squadron was wiped out. Altogether, these losses amounted to nearly half of Britain's fighter strength. Worst of all was the loss of over 200 trained pilots, whose preparation had taken years. In May 1940, a captured Messerschmitt Bf-109E was tested against the Hurricane, revealing the British fighter's weaknesses. The Bf-109E was faster at most altitudes, could dive better thanks to its fuel-injected engine, and its cannon armament allowed it to engage from longer range. The Hurricane's armor offered poor protection even against 7.9mm rounds, let alone 13mm or 20mm shells. Its only clear advantage was a tighter turning radius, which made it superior in horizontal maneuvers. These losses were the price of the Hurricane's first combat experience. They exposed the aircraft's shortcomings, but also proved its ability to meet the enemy head-on. To succeed in the battles ahead, it would need both technical improvements and new tactics, changes that were already beginning to take shape. The summer of 1940 proved decisive for the Hawker Hurricane, as it played a central role in the Battle of Britain, one of the largest air campaigns of the Second World War. After the defeat in France and the evacuation from Dunkirk, the RAF faced a new threat, the Luftwaffe's Adlerangriff, Eagle Attack, an offensive aimed at destroying Britain's air power in preparation for invasion. German targets included airfields, command posts, radar stations, and aircraft factories. By 8 August 1940, the date the British count as the start of the battle, Fighter Command had 720 operational aircraft, with Hurricanes making up the majority, 28 squadrons compared to 17 flying Spitfires. The Hurricane remained the RAF's primary fighter thanks to its numbers, reliability, and ability to operate from virtually any airfield. The battle opened with Luftwaffe strikes against shipping in the English Channel and ports along the south coast. On 8 August, a Hurricane squadron from West Hampnet intercepted a formation of Ju-87 dive bombers, escorted by Bf-109s and Bf-110s over a convoy near the Isle of Wight. Spitfires joined in, and the fight grew into a clash involving 5 RAF squadrons. That same day, German aircraft bombed Dover and a convoy at the Thames estuary, while on 12th of August they struck radar stations and airfields in Kent, destroying 1 and damaging 4 others. The main Adlerangriff assault began on 13th of August, but the opening day brought little success for Germany. Thanks to radar alerts, RAF fighters intercepted the attacks, downing 47 enemy aircraft for the loss of 13 of their own. Most German targets deep inside Britain were spared, as cloud cover and rapid RAF responses disrupted the raids. On 15th of August, the Luftwaffe mounted a massive strike with 3 air fleets, committing 970 fighters and bombers. From then until mid-September, battles sometimes involved up to 200 aircraft at once. Air Vice Marshal Keith Park, commanding No. 11 Group, developed a strategy for pairing Hurricanes and Spitfires. Hurricanes concentrated on the bombers, while Spitfires engaged the fighter escorts. The Hurricane was highly effective against Ju-87 dive bombers and twin-engine Bf-110s using its superior turning ability in level flight, though it struggled more against the agile Bf-109E. German tactics included freie Jagd, free hunts, to attack RAF fighters during takeoff and landing. To improve bomber survivability, He-111s, Do-17s, and Ju-88s were fitted with extra defensive guns and armor, reducing the effectiveness of the Hurricane's 8 303-inch Browning machine guns. The fighting was relentless. Squadrons often lost an aircraft a day, and pilots flew as many as 5 or 6 sorties, refueling and rearming right at their dispersal points. On 16 August, Ju-88s bombed hangars at RAF Bryce Norton, destroying 28 fighters on the ground. Luftwaffe strikes against aircraft factories and parked aircraft added to the losses. To keep units at strength, the RAF pulled aircraft from reserves, repair depots, and training units, and even called on test pilots and trainee airmen. The Hurricane's sturdy construction meant that many damaged airframes could be patched up quickly and returned to service. The fiercest period came between 26 August and 6 September, when Fighter Command lost 134 Hurricanes, the equivalent of 7 squadrons. 35 pilots were killed and 60 wounded. Still, the RAF held the line. Special recovery teams worked around the clock to salvage and repair battle-damaged aircraft. Pilot heroism became legendary. Flight Lieutenant James Nicholson, badly wounded and with his Hurricane in flames, refused to bail out until he had destroyed a Bf-110. After parachuting, he was nearly shot by the Home Guard, but survived to receive the Victoria Cross. Other notable pilots included legless ace Douglas Bader and South African Adolf Sailor Merlin, the latter finishing the war with 38 confirmed kills. By late September, the tempo of battle slowed. On 15 September, now celebrated as Battle of Britain Day, the Luftwaffe lost 56 aircraft to 15 Hurricanes and 11 Spitfires. On 17 September, Hitler postponed the invasion and the Germans shifted to night bombing raids. In the Battle of Britain, Hurricanes were credited with 57% of all enemy aircraft destroyed, including 272 Bf-109s. 7 of the top 17 RAF aces of the campaign flew Hurricanes. By the end of September, the RAF fielded 35 squadrons of the type, underlining its numerical and operational importance. The Hurricane also saw service beyond Britain. In 1938, Yugoslavia bought 12 aircraft and a license to build them at the Rogojarski and Zmaj factories. By April 1941, Zmaj had completed 20 of 60 ordered, though Rogojarski delivered none. 38 Yugoslav Hurricanes fought as fighters and ground attack aircraft until 13th April when they were destroyed on the ground. One experimental aircraft was fitted with a DB601A engine in 1941, but its fate is unknown. Belgium purchased 20 Hurricanes and a production license for Avian's Ferry. 15 aircraft were delivered by September 1939 and flew through the winter of 1939-40, but most were lost on the first day of the German invasion. In Canada, a Montreal plant began production in 1940, building 166 Hurricane Mach-Is before switching to the MKX powered by the Packard Merlin 28. These aircraft were supplied to Britain, with some retained for Canadian service. The Battle of Britain was the Hurricane's finest hour. Its crucial role in repelling the German offensive, the courage of its pilots, and its ability to endure sustained combat earned it a permanent place in aviation history, even as its limitations in firepower and protection made further improvements inevitable.